Hey everyone, I'm Pastor Bill Tesch.
I'm Pastor Brad Skogen.
I serve as the bishop here in the Northwestern Minnesota Synod.
I serve as one of the Synod ministers for community leadership and engagement, and I also serve as pastor at First Lutheran Church in Battle Lake.
Pastor Brad and I wanted to have an opportunity just to have a conversation with you and with each other in these really stressful times, and how we're managing ourselves and how we're finding ways to be resilient. Pastor Brad, I remember during the bishop's election process, there was a moment when you said to the assembly, "I burned out."
Yeah.
And I just remember how moved I was by that, and I think others were too. And I wonder if you might share about that experience and your way back.
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity to do that again. It was an incredibly vulnerable moment to open up and acknowledge I have that experience, and a way through, and recognizing and identifying. I know I'm not the only one that has had some bumps with resiliency, compassion fatigue, or even having that burnout experience, and recognizing how many other folks who maybe aren't at a point of being able to articulate it or even recognizing it are experiencing that. And right now, with all that we're experiencing and pressures, what we're living with in ministry and in the world, I have a concern that folks are more at risk for that, and wanting to represent that it's not some kind of personal flaw. It's a part of vulnerability and brokenness that anyone is susceptible to. And in my experience, I had the opportunity to live with it, and at some point embrace and transform it. And journey back into a sense of well-being and meaning.
So I'm wondering, what were some signs for you that you weren't in a good place anymore?
I started noticing really a sense of really being hard on myself, and even a loss of meaning and identity, and even a sense of there's no way I should be a pastor.
Wow.
And there were a couple of events that contributed to that, where what was going on inside of me, and what I was thinking and feeling, really brought me to a point of feeling like there's no way I'm not doing this. I'm not. How could I continue to do this? And interestingly, some of that is sort of self-aggrandizing, because some of those circumstances were normal bumps in the road, or normal, right. And I thought, well, if I can't do that, how can I be a pastor?
Yeah, like you should be able to do everything.
Absolutely.
Yeah. That's so interesting, because it resonates with what we are hearing a lot from our leaders and rostered ministers these days, feeling guilty because they're doing a lot, but they don't know if they're doing enough, and or if they're doing it right. We're all learning everything new nowadays.
Yeah.
We're making a video, and my dog's scratching at the door, and you can probably see and hear that back there, and we're just going to ignore that. And but we're all trying to figure stuff out right now.
Right. And we're none of us perfect.
No.
And part of my embracing this is recognizing, recovering from perfectionism, and really wanting to do everything right and wanting to be liked, and that just doesn't always work.
Yeah.
one of I think a story and a good example of how this happened for me and played a part of it was I had serving in a congregation, had a parishioner, a member of the congregation in hospice at the time. And I'd spent a good amount of time with those folks and much conversation, and really helped this husband and wife connect with each other and communicate in ways that they hadn't been able to yet. And there came a time where it was in the fall of the year, and I had some vacation planned to go do some fishing and hunting. And I knew he was in hospice and where things are. And as I left, and we were in a good place all around with everybody and each other. And I was gone for 2 weeks. And while I was gone, he died. And the funeral took place while I was gone and all of that. And I came back from that vacation and learned about that and actually felt like, we had connected and we had, we knew that might happen and everything. And there was somebody who was, I think, intending to be well-meaning, who mentioned that that this particular person kept asking for me. And that I think in a way that they were trying to value the relationship, what I heard in that was I should have been there. Yeah. And I took time off and I took time away, and that created this sense that that I compromised my role as the pastor and the care provider, but also compromised their experience of dying and finding comfort. And so, in the aftermath of that internally for me, that was one of those times where I went, how can I be a good pastor if I can't be there when people need me? And
there is something aggrandizing in that, isn't there? There's that I'm the one that has to carry this water and be there for this family, and no one else can do it.
Right.
So, how'd you find your way back?
One of the I just hit bottom, and I transitioned from one call into something else, and that's I think a feature of burnout is the need or the actuality of changing what you're doing,
making a change.
And so I did that, and around the same time, I started recognizing that as head smart and educated as I was, my own faith and my spiritual development and sense of true self were really lacking, and I was there was an immaturity there. I was ordained. I had my certificate on the wall and everything, but I had a lot of false self that was there, and false ego and all of that, and recognizing that there was some true self to be nurtured and developed.
Yeah, a true self that isn't capable of all things.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And there were some people that were a key part of that, and some reading and some learning and some therapy and spiritual direction that were a part of that. That's when I was introduced to the work of Richard Rohr, for example. Right. And I started reading Thomas.
Good old
Merton,
Father Rohr.
Father Richard. I started reading Thomas Merton and rereading some Henry Nouwen, but also connecting with some folks who also would go to a vulnerable place. Yeah. And be real and recognize brokenness and in an accepting way.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's what we really need to be able to provide for each other, isn't it? As leaders, in this sort of guild of serving in the church, pastors and Sams and deacons, there is something very unique about that.
Yeah.
You know, we're carrying not only physical and emotional stress, but also there's this spiritual burden that we carry.
Yeah.
Often, expected to provide soul care when sometimes our own soul needs a lot of care, right?
But when do we get to worship? If I'm always leading worship, where's my opportunity to worship?
Yeah.
And if I'm pouring out, where's my opportunity to get refilled?
And where is that for you?
For me, I found some daily practices, and those have shifted over the years in different times, whether it's journaling or morning prayer out of the old LBW, or those are some of those daily practices. For me, a piece of it is reading. Another piece, and this is really hard for me right now, is music.
Yeah.
I started college as a music major, and one of the ways that I do self-care is taking voice lessons and singing and finding my voice again.
Right.
So there are some intentional things like that I've done, as well as intentionally engaging with a spiritual director. And another thing at the time, I had the opportunity to work together with a couple of other men and develop a men's group. It was part book club, part accountability group, and part talk big and go, but there's also an intentionality about authenticity and vulnerability there. And I later got to know the work of Brene Brown, for example, and
Sure.
Her extraordinary work on vulnerability. But
Right.
that was a key, because I also I thought to be perfect and to have it all together and to show up all the time for everybody in every way, that also meant hiding a lot of myself.
Right.
And in practicing vulnerability and not hiding myself, that's incredibly liberating. It takes so much less energy.
Yeah. And so this, we kind of have to be partners in each other's resiliency, don't we? I mean, we need to find that trusted friend or group of friends, allies, spiritual advisors who can hold a mirror up.
Yeah.
Isn't it? So one of the things I've heard you talk about, Pastor Brad, is how important having a sense of agency. That none of us are in control of our lives, but we have some control over some things in our lives that matter. Yeah. And I know that's an issue for many of our leaders now. Everything seems to be out of control. Yeah. So we have congregations that are eager to get back to worship and probably have a different idea about that than the pastors do. I wonder if you might comment on that.
As I worked this out and walked this path and with others, and felt like I was finding restoration in that. At the time, I was working in healthcare as a chaplain, and I was recognizing physicians experiencing burnout, and did some work with that. And one of the really good examples that comes to mind about agency is we were seeing these folks who were highly educated and highly respected, and would identify a treatment or a prescription or something like that, and have someone else in perhaps an administrative role or an insurance provider, somebody else, second guess or rescind all of that professional judgment and feeling a sense of loss of agency in that way. But we also saw it in little things like scheduling and how how much control I have over my time, and how much scrutiny of my time. I mean, I can't imagine living with the scrutiny of 15 or 10 or 5 minute increments of my life,
Right.
and having dollar values assigned to that. And so restoring agency in finding places to exercise that is really crucial. And something like that could be a daily exercise,
Yeah.
a daily a discipline in some way.
Yeah.
That broken and imperfect as I am, Jesus looks on me, and God looks at me and you as beloved, and those that at the core, me, yes, me. It's for me. Yeah, it's for me. It's so easy for me to do that for someone else.
Yeah. But doing it for ourselves.
It's harder to do it for myself.
But we have to, don't we?
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Pastor Brad. And speaking of beloved, there's a beloved pet here that's just been dying to get out, and we're going to let her out and play with her for a bit. And thank you for your ministry.
Yeah.
And God's peace be with you.
Bless you.